questions on the, oh,
I forgot.
that's okay. Did we have any other questions on the Ridge Trail project? Okay, so we will go ahead and, like I said, we'll get that meeting scheduled to USFS, and we'll have some more information for you once we get through that. Have a better idea, timeline, things like that. So we will touch base. So this Horace Hill planning meeting, okay, we've talked about doing this a number of times. At the last meeting, I said, I'll get one together. And then, like, real quick at the end of the conversation, it was, well, I don't know who should be in the room. And, you know, we got to make sure we have everybody in the room who wants to be in the room. I don't want to have this meeting without making sure that we have everybody in the room. Okay. Now, that being said, I don't want this meeting to turn into, 30 people who are interested in one aspect of it and one person who is interested in another aspect, because I feel like that's what we were running into before we made this formal group. So I think as far as this meeting goes, I would like to have all of the interested parties represented, but maybe not, 10 people from each one of those interested parties. So I think if, we can kind of limit it to say, as far as the interested parties go, let's find that person who is going to be the champion of your organization to be having this discussion. Okay. Outside of that, I think any voting members who want to be there, any public who want to be there, that's great as well. I don't want anyone to feel as though they're being left out. And even then, I wouldn't be opposed to, like, for instance, SoVTA, like there's, Steve's behind the scenes here doing a lot of this work, but then Tim is there as well. So I don't want to feel like you guys aren't represented, but I'd like to have one person there speaking on behalf of the organization. By all means, Tim could come.
No, it's the same thing as this, just one speaking member from each group.
Correct.
Yeah. That makes total sense.
I'm just really trying not to muddy the conversation. Sarah, you look concerned.
No, I'm just thinking about, it's a subcommittee of this group, so it's a public meeting, anybody can come, but at the end of the day, the only voting members of the subcommittee are members of this committee.
Correct.
So people can be, passionate in their support of something, but at the end of the day, unless they're on this list, they're not going to get a vote. So as long
and I don't think, honestly, I don't think anything would be voted on during this meeting anyway, right? It's just bringing that plan.
Eventually.
Yeah, right. But bringing that plan from the meeting back to this group for that vote for a recommendation to the select board. But what I don't want to do with this meeting is waste anybody's time and have it, turn into something where we're not being cooperative and we're not, having the discussion the way we should be having the discussion. So I think the easiest way to maintain that is to look at it as, interested parties have that representative. And just kind of as a precursor to that meeting, it's clear through multiple discussions that people would like to see many uses on Horace Hill, or as many as possible without, making them awful, right? So I don't know that any one particular group is going to get everything that they wanted to get out of their original plan, okay? And that's just the way things are probably going to end up shaking out if we ever want to get moving on anything on Horace Hill. If people stand their ground and can't work with these other organizations to say, yeah, we can make a concession here when you make a concession here, so that we can kind of fit all these things together and make it this awesome thing that we've always talked about it being, it's going to take those concessions. Okay, so as long as we all go into this conversation knowing that that's going to end up being the case in the long run, like I said, if we want to have any progress made, the conversation is going to go a lot better and we're going to be a lot more productive with it. Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions about this meeting?
I do.
Sorry.
Hey, Eric, it's Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
Would it help maybe to go back and revisit the study that was done, just so that as each one of us or members of these interested parties Just keep in mind what the town wants, what the townspeople were asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that document is really our guiding light, right? I mean, we paid a large amount of American currency to come up with this plan to tell us, you know, right, here are the things you guys have already done and they're awesome, and here's the things we can do in conjunction with those things that would make it even more awesome. So because we have that plan, we're not at the stage where we need to recreate the wheel. We already have all the information that we need. We just need to make it all work together. Okay, and I think that's what this meeting is about. Okay, but yeah, by all means, I mean, like even the next conversation we're about to go into about additional things in that plan, you know, that aren't necessarily covered in Horace Hill. I mean, it's important that we all have a pretty good understanding of what that document is and the information that's provided in it. Any other questions on this potential meeting? Trisha, Andy, I'll get you next.
So it's basically going to be an informational meeting where all the different, I want to say the word venues, but all the different uses come together and have presentations about all the different trail usages.
So I don't think that it's, I think we're past the point of presentations, right? Like everybody's already kind of talked about what it is they want to do. What this meeting is going to do is finally get everybody in a room to say, you know, here's how all these things will work together.
Right,
Okay?
like
Here's how we can get this. This is like actual, like, okay, you know, like let's do kind of like let's get a rough idea together of what this thing looks like with the interested parties, you know, kind of working on these things together. Because to this point, all we've had is those separate presentations, you know, whether it be hiking trails or biking trails or disc golf. And we have amazing information on that and what it will look like. What we need now is for those groups to be talking to each other about what those things look like together.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just
Yep,
wanted
I
to.
got, yep, perfect. Thank you, Patricia. I have Andy, and then I have Jeremy, and then I have Julia. So give me just 1 second here, okay? So Andy, you're up.
So my only observation would be that this meeting, it would be good if everybody was clear as to what the purpose of it was. And from my recollection, we had a bunch of presentations about different uses, some of which might conflict with each other. The group, there was a zeitgeist about, hey, let's see if we can't incorporate all of these different uses, specifically, you know, mountain biking, disc golf, skiing, snowshoeing, etc. And this meeting was to see if those different uses could occupy that 50 acres together. And this group would make a decision after your planning meeting as to what uses the project would be designed for, and then hire an engineering firm or a trails company to design and build that facility. Is my understanding of what that meeting was, the purpose of that meeting, is that correct? Am I right?
That is correct. That's what we're looking for at this point. We honestly, I mean, with the Horace Hill property, we've had, like I said, we've had some great presentations. I feel like even this group has talked a lot about, yeah, we'd like to see all of those things working together. But this meeting is going to be, you know, figuring out what that looks like and what concessions can be made from any particular groups so that we can try to work those things together in a way that makes sense. I don't want to see Horace Hill just turn into a big jumbled mess. That's not what I'm saying, but like we need to be in a room together. We need to be talking about how these things work in conjunction with each other so that we can actually make progress forward on these projects. So yes, out of this meeting, we would bring a plan of sorts back to this group to say, hey, here's what we came up with and here's what it potentially looks like, so that that group can make, vote to make a recommendation to the select board to move forward. Once we get through those processes, yes, we would be looking into, getting the engineers and the planners and everybody up there to make it a reality. That makes sense? Andy, was that it, Andy?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Yeah, I really appreciate, Eric, like the way that you're trying to move us forward. And, we definitely have, been talking about doing something with this property for a long time. And I think that the folks of the town need it. And I think that our visitors, it's just about money for local businesses. The sooner that we can get this going, especially on the bumper seasons. I don't think that there's much of a conflict between the interests as there really needs to be. And so definitely, the Weston and Sampson report is pretty clear about here's what we recommend and here are the priorities that should be looked at. And so I think what we could do is we could be a little optimistic and just think that this meeting could be really just about what do we need to talk about, but then more on the action steps of moving forward. And I thought that perhaps we could consider not going for a vote at the end of it, but instead aspiring to some sort of general consensus, because it seems like if you have parties that are going to, we have to agree anyways, because we got to work with each other. And so, and a lot of it is just about information too. There's been some, not great information out there about how a couple of these different projects can work together. And so I just think that right now we're past the point of what should go there. And now we're at the point of let's work together. So I would just say that if I could be a part of this group, I would recommend that we not think of a vote where someone's gonna get outvoted, but at least first start with just an idea of collaboration and go for consensus about how do we move forward so that we can meet timetables that would potentially have things open for our next tourist bumper seasons or tourist season.
Right. Thank you, Jeremy. Julia?
Okay, just if we can revisit for 1 second so that we're all clear what we are trying to work together there. It's hiking, biking, skiing, snowshoeing, snowmobile trail, and disc golf. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
I think on that property, that's kind of the things that were originally talked about.
Then my other thought is make sure we're all clear that that's what we're trying to work together and accommodate throughout it. And I might suggest that rather than sit around a conference room, you start the meeting with everyone going to visit the site together and just kind of walk it a little bit and visualize how each of those pieces are going to fit together. That's my piece.
Julia, I think that's a great idea. And I know Steve had some preliminary maps of the property itself, which would be helpful for the group as well. Just to kind of take a look at that stuff. Sarah, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say we're, as Julia just said, we're pretty much have refined the idea of what we want to put there. And I love the idea of actually going out and, getting our feet wet on the land and seeing it. But honestly, none of us really are qualified to determine how these things will work together. So maybe our next step is actually writing an RFP or a trail engineer or a facilities engineer to come and tell us, yes, in fact, you can do all these things together, or if you do this, you're really not going to be able to do that, or you're going to have to create seasons, but I don't think any of us can look at that land and say, we know for sure that we can do all of these things and then hire someone to design it, because that person may then come back and say, what you're asking me to put, 10 pounds of fun in a 5-pound bag, and I can't do that. So I love the idea of us getting together and walking the land, but I think that deciding priorities really, in a sense, has already happened. I mean, we really have had that conversation already. And so I think we're further ahead than where that meeting needs to be.
Okay. Steve, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, like one thing that we're missing is way earlier on, like we had talked about having interpretive stuff on the property for the trail. Sorry, can you hear me, Sarah? Okay.
Old and very deaf.
It's okay. We still love you. But like we had talked about doing interpretive stuff on the property, like just stuff that was ancillary to the recreation activities on the property. And those things I still think are very important. So I think we should keep them in mind, that they don't just
like
get
historical markers kind of thing?
Yeah, and all of that stuff, like since I'm doing a lot of grant writing right now, is extraordinarily important. So while we have like the recreational aspects, there's the other community aspects that we need to look at on the property. We're also going to have a very hard time finding a firm that is an expert in all of this, because there's very, very few instances. The only firm that I can think of is SE Group. That's pretty much the one, but we know how they work. They're extraordinarily expensive. So I just think we need to be, pragmatic. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so we're kind of
I just want to make sure we're not missing anything. That's all.
no, I totally get it, Steve. I 100% agree with you, and I apologize for leaving that piece of it out. So
okay,
thank
you. Cool. No worries. We're
you
good
for reminding me. So what does this group want to see then? Do we want to see that RFP to?
I don't think we're ready for an RFP yet.
Well, I'd love to see a site visit.
Jeremy?
Start.
Yeah.
Jeremy?
So I think, site visit is great. I think that we need to talk about what the RFP would look like, because I think that some sort of like, meta designer for all these things is one way to go, but I bet we could talk, I think we could probably get a mountain bike trails designer and a disc golf course designer for a lot less to come and collaborate in real time together. And so my idea is just like that idea I just threw out there is the conversation we need to have. I'm sure that, well, I don't want to speak, Steve, I assume that you would back me up here that some of the people that make money to design mountain bike trails might not necessarily be exactly what local mountain bikers would want on there. My assumption is that those of us that mountain bike in the area probably do things differently than what some of these firms might do, and we can still listen to their ideas, but we might not have to hire just one firm, but we could rather have other people that are interested in a specific project maybe collaborate together along with those of us that already kind of know maybe the way we see our projects playing out. So I think we need to have a conversation about let's do an RFP and what is the RFP going to look like, because at least when it comes to disc golf, a firm that says, oh yeah, we've added disc golf to our offerings of many things that we will design for you, it's just probably not the best place to start. So
I would think that that conversation of what the RFP would look like would come out of the next meeting.
Yes.
So that we may not need to go the way of a civil engineer that's working on it, but we really need to get a better idea of how these things are working together. Then we can kind of put together what the RFP would look like and who we're actually going after with the RFP.
Kristen?
Hey, Eric, you spent time down in Northampton, right?
I did.
Is there a possibility, I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel. Is there a possibility of talking to either people who served on some committee or in some capacity there and designing, people like us, to find out how they went through the process too? Like the RFP process, who they talked to, because that's a multi-use property, right?
It is. Steve?
So I did find out who the group is that's supposed to be maintaining the mountain bike trails there. I did, before I left, I sent an email out to them just to kind of find out what was going on. But as we saw in that, some of the pictures, there was a lot of neglect going on in that network. So that the firm that did that may not be the particular firm we want to align with. Just because they did it did mean they did it well, and that's something we need to look at. That's my only concern. So,
Patricia,
I'm just wondering if people have a comment on the last one, but there's somebody, I just keep hearing this like, there's some like really loud staticky noise from
it may
somebody.
just be the room noise from the main room there. So
Oh, all right, okay. And Northampton, there, anyway, the designer may not be as mountainous. Their stuff, you know, is just different. I guess that's all. It was just mainly the static that I originally raised my hand for.
Steve, one second. Steve, 1 second. I'm going to go to, sorry. Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that the maintenance of that trail is not the same as the design of the trail. So they could have done an excellent design system, and the property, people responsible for the property didn't keep it up. So that, you know, one of the things we're going to be talking about certainly is how we're going to handle property maintenance, and you know, where that's going to, is there going to be a trails employed position, that kind of thing. That's down the road. But for right now, you know, if I remember right, you said that there was a lot of vertical in the Northampton, similar to what we have at Horace Hill. So I definitely like Kristen's idea of going and asking, you know, well, how did you guys get there? But then from there, we also need to make sure we don't follow their lead when it comes to the after effects.
Steve, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, you know, the process of us going out, you know, and finding other firms that may have done other projects, you know, we'll go out and try and identify those firms, and then we can bring it back to the group and we can go, okay, this is their best of work, and see if we find what aligns best with us. I mean, that's part of this process.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of the process, right?
Yeah,
Is that we don't end up, you know,
it's not like we're just going to pick one firm to do it. We're going to find out who best aligns.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some, you know,
all of these companies, you know, the same as when we did the RFP for the Dover website or the RFQ for Bytown Marketing or any of these other projects that we work on, you know, we send these things out. You know, the website, we had 50 different companies thereabouts reply to us that we got to pick from, right? So like my goal here is not to just pick the first person who jumps out of the hat and says, hey, I know all about this stuff. Like I can, you know, we want to make sure whoever we're talking to is qualified to be looking at the space to do these things. So that being said, Jeremy, I love your idea of pulling in people from each kind of aspect of what we're looking at there. Here's the issue with that, okay? All of these projects, when it comes time to put them in, are going to be well over the threshold of spending for us to just say, yeah, we're going to go with you, right? Each one of these projects individually are going to be their own RFP. Even if they've said like, hey, all of these things will work together, they're still going to be their own RFP. So the thing I want to avoid is say, you know, we pull in that awesome disc golf designer, but in the long run, we don't get to go with his company because of that RFP process. Like this isn't just, well, I talked to this guy, so we get to go with him. It's like it's with the town over a certain amount, right? We have to send out that RFP. So we may not end up going with whoever did the initial walkthrough to say, yes, it would work together. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Andy, you had a question.
Just a comment that when we put out the RFP for the firm to do the trails plan, the long-term study, you know, the folks that actually got the contract, you know, they were good on facilities, parks, skating rinks, all that kind of stuff, parking lots, less good on trails. So they actually brought on a trail company, a trail designer, John Morton, and said, you know, we're answering your RFP as a partnership. You know, the engineering firm is the, you know, the main company you're going to be dealing with, but John is going to be at every meeting, and he'll be handling trail specific ends of the plan. And I wonder if writing the RFP, we couldn't request something similar. you know, the RFP will include partnerships with trail-specific companies and disc golf-specific firms who are capable of building the project as well as planning it. Maybe you can put that right in the RFP. And I think the folks who did the plan, I remember asking Rochelle, and she said, sure, they'd be happy to talk to us about actually designing Horace Hill and bringing people in.
Pete,
One thing is, I know that was a conversation. Unfortunately, my opinion is, John Morton did a horrible job. He was very cross-country ski biased, and that showed in the report. I don't think some things got as granular as they needed to be. I've looked at some other reports from other companies since that, and yeah, like, I don't know. I was very unhappy with a lot of the stuff that Morton did.
Is there any other, Sarah?
I was just gonna say, I don't think Andy was saying we go back to them, but we go
Oh,
back.
okay.
To
Then
that
I apologize. Thank you. I apologize. He was just saying to make that an amendment to the RFP.
Go with that concept that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
asked,
yeah.
right?
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, correct.
Awesome. Okay, that makes sense.
So I guess we gotta pull this thing back then. So what do we want our next step to be with Horace Hill? What does the group think? I mean, so if we think we're past the meeting, we understand that these, I mean, do we want to have a meeting about the RFP?
I think we should have a meeting with all the groups. I do think that's important. Everybody needs to get in a room with a map and we just kind of stare at it, get an idea, and then we can go to the RFP. We as the users and the executors of this project need to know exactly what we want to get at. And we're not quite there yet.
Okay. I have Jeremy, and then I'll get to you, Andy.
Yeah, I just think it's also really important that the hiking and snowmobile and cross-country ski, I know that, Steve, you might span several different communities here, but like, I think that we've talked about mountain biking integration with disc golf, and that's something that I already know a lot about. I know nothing about snowmobiles and how design, that really affects, the snow, time when there's tons of snow there, like how that should be considered. But I think that we could both do that and then also at the same meeting move forward on RFPs and have just a longer version of the conversation we just started here. What kind of RFP? And
It's a long meeting, but yeah, no, that's fine.
What's that?
I said it's a long meeting to do both of those.
So the thing is, though, Steve.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator.
Well, yeah.
We don't cross-talk. We are recognized by the moderator.
Yeah, sorry. No crosstalk. Sorry, guys.
Well, yeah, Steve, this is really a part of this whole collaboration thing.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. Sorry, Jeremy. The way this works is going to be explained by the moderator.
So I had initially acknowledged you, Jeremy. I do apologize. We have to stop the crosstalk. I'm going to move to Andy, who I recognized after your point was made. Okay. Andy?
So I just wanted to bring us back to Sarah's point that none of us are qualified to design this thing. If you come out of your meeting with a map, I think that's a little ambitious. I think that you can't be married to your map. These engineers and these professionals will tell us what can and cannot be done and what are the pluses and minuses of putting things where here, there, and everywhere else. That's what we'll pay them to do. I think when I envisioned your meeting, when you talked about it at first, I thought it was going to be something about deciding which uses would be on the property. But if we're there already, if we know what uses we want, you can have your meeting, certainly, especially if the folks involved feel that you need it. But the next step is the RFP, and I don't think we should drag our feet on that. Just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Jeremy, did you have your hand up again, or is that a new hand? Okay. So to that point, let's have a discussion as a group if that's going to be our next step, then do we have a meeting to talk about what's in the RFP? See a lot of nodding heads. Yes. Okay. What I'm going to do with that meeting is I will send out a doodle poll to obviously all the voting members of this board and the interested parties of anybody who's not a voting member of this board who wishes to represent, one of the interests of Horace Hill. It will be a public meeting because we'll have a number of voting members there, so it'll have to be a publicly warned meeting. What I'm going to do is I will send out I'll send out a doodle poll with enough time for us to get that meeting warned. And again, it'll be an open and public meeting. I will moderate as I do with these meetings, just to make sure we stay on track, and we hopefully will come out of that with a tentative RFP to have a look at this thing. Steve, did you have a comment?
When are we thinking about doing that meeting?
At this point, we'd have to, like I said, we got to make sure we get it out and warned. I'm thinking potentially, maybe an afternoon during the week of the 23rd through the 27th.
Yeah, I was just curious about time.
Yep. I'd like to get it moving, right? Because we've talked and we've talked and we've talked. I think it's time for us to start.
I mean, we could do it sooner. I was just curious as to what your thoughts were.
Yeah, the only thing there is, again, we have to make sure that we have everybody there that we need to have with the doodle poll, and then we have to make sure we give ourselves time to make sure the meeting is publicly warned. Because we are, we operate under those rules. So I will get that doodle poll out to everybody probably tomorrow. If there's anybody not included in that doodle poll or that you think should be, please reach out to me and I can send it to them. And then once we do set a date, obviously feel free to let anybody know that they are welcome to attend the meeting, but it will be a conversation about this project. Does anyone else have any other questions about this? Sarah Shippey.
I just wanted to say, I apologize in advance for putting more on your plate, but since you are familiar with how RFPs are written, maybe you could create a bare bones structure for us to work from, instead of starting from scratch, where a lot of us don't know the structure of an RFP. And so we'd just be throwing ideas at you and expecting you to put it together anyway.
Right.
So maybe if we came into the meeting with some sort of a frame to hang our ideas off of, it would go more quickly.
Okay. Sarah, thank you for the suggestion. No, that's not a problem at all. I can at least get the rough draft of it together, and from there we can all take a look at it and say, no, we'd like to add this, change this, or remove this. Even then, so this will happen prior to our next trails meeting, so that anyone who's not able to attend this particular meeting, we're going to bring this RFP that we agree on back to the trails group to say, hey, we'd like to put this out there. Okay. And I know it seems like that even that's dragging it out a little bit, but that's the purpose of this group. So the purpose of the subcommittee is to get this RFP together in the way that we think it should be written. We bring that back to this trails group for a recommendation vote, and from there it would be either yay or nay by the select board, and then we send it out. Everybody clear on the process? Okay. Any other questions on this before we move on? Guys, Patricia.
Oh, sorry. I can research writing RFPs to help out if you want.
No, I think we're good, because at this point, even just in my time in Dover, I've got a number of them under my belt, so I'm happy to crack away at it. I know what it should look like from the framework anyway. So, thank you. But I think we're good.
All right. Well, if you need me to research like a certain aspect of it, just email.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I think that was a good discussion. We will move on to what I believe is yes. Just, I wanted to give everybody a brief update. So at the beginning, we had someone from the school come to talk to us about a pump track. Then the conversation was diverted to the select board. When it did get onto the select board agenda, it actually turned out that they were able to free up the grant money that they were hoping to have in the first place to complete the project. So they will be moving forward with their pump track project up at the high school
Sarah,
with the grant money. Sarah?
did you skip the additional outdoor recreational considerations?
Oh, I did.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay, so we just switched orders on those things. That was my school pump track update. Does anyone have any questions on the pump track? Steve?
just out of curiosity, is we've had no interaction. You guys may have with Mike or Wendy up at the mountain, except a couple of emails. Have they done any of their project review sheets or permitting, so that we can think about connecting that to the rest of the town network?
That would be a great question for Mike. So why don't I don't have that information specifically.
I didn't know if you did, if you had been discussed with you or not. That's all.
I do not specifically. So why don't we get that on the agenda to have Mike give us an update on that for the next meeting, just so we can kind of start that conversation about how those things fit together.
Yep. No
Okay.
worries.
Perfect. Thanks for bringing that up, Steve. Anything else on the pump track before I go back to additional outdoor recreation considerations? Okay, so the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because we've had a lot of talks about what's going to be happening up on Horace Hill, right? And they're the types of projects that you would consider would fit the type of property that Horace Hill is, okay, which is, you know, hilly and not suited for everything that's in our rec plan. So I wanted to kind of open the conversation up about, you know, some of the other things that we talked about in our rec plan that maybe are even a few years further out than some of the initial recommendations, i.e. a skate park, the Gaga pit, an ice skating rink. And I just wanted to get some initial discussion going about, you know, where we think those things fit, you know, both in town and in our planning processes as this trail group. You know, does anybody have any thoughts? Right.
Nope.
Steve, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to be acknowledged. The only one thing I would add to that is like the development of community-based programs,
Mhm.
like the youth programs and stuff that we've been talking about.
Yep.
That's the only thing that I would add into that conversation.
No, and I think that that's a really integral part, right? Because even if we do get these things done up on Horace Hill, half of getting that stuff done is that we get people up there to use them, and that's where these youth programs are coming in, or even adult programs with education and things like
Sorry,
that.
that was the next point that I was going to make.
Yep.
Is, you know, we as an organization are more focused on like kids and youth
Yep.
and stuff, but we do need to be looking at like adult and programs and, you know, whatever for older people, like let's say 35, 40 and over. I'm just trying to, you know,
That's not
Yeah.
okay.
I knew I was digging a hole. I apologize. But like, you know what I mean? Not like youth programs, but like more adult orientated, you know, programs.
Well, I completely agree. Patricia, you had your hand up.
I actually can't even remember after that. That's good. Yeah, no, ice rinks. We do live in the North Country, so I guess you covered it all. Sorry.
Sarah?
The nearest largish scale ice rinks are Brattleboro and North Adams. So we're kind of in a nice pocket where that would be something, and that could be something that could be a public-private kind of a thing that might actually be a potential revenue stream for, you know, hockey tournaments or, you know, open where we would still have free skating for community members or something like that. But I think we're also now talking, we're looking at things that we're now really going to have to develop a Parks and Rec department. It's going to be a part of the town. And so one of the parts of the conversation is going to need to be what kind of recommendations would we be making to the select board in terms of how that would be structured, how it would be paid for, what their responsibilities would be. And the more facilities we develop, the more urgent it becomes that we have an actual Parks and Rec department and not just ask Travis to pull one guy off of highway to, Zamboni the ice or something. So that a long-term conversation needs to be, what's a vision for a Parks and Rec department for the town?
Completely agree. Thank you, Sarah. Shannon.
So just because, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Just because a lot of the people here weren't part of the earlier conversation when we did the rec plan. So the Gaga pit, I don't know if everybody knows what that is. But it's like a playground game that's really popular in camps. My Girl Scout troop, the Dover Girl Scout troop, had plans on building one at the school, but that was pre-COVID, so everything kind of took a hit with our funding and everything there and speaking to the school board, but that is something they still want to do in the future. But that would be at the school. Which if you've read the Weston and Sampson plan, the things that we add to the school aren't super ideal because they're not as easily accessible as adding things to the park. We also had a conversation with Eric's predecessor, Steve. We had looked at like temporary skating rinks, which a lot of towns have, where they're outdoors and you can drop them in. They're not super expensive. So that's something we've looked at a little bit as well. And then just so people understand, even though Steve just called all of us old, when we were finalizing the Weston and Sampson plan, I did interview all of the students at Dover School. They all took a survey, and so their choices were ranked and made it into the plan as well. So that's where some of these other venue kind of recreating things outside of Horace Hill, that's where they came from in that plan, the street from the kids themselves.
Thank you, Shannon. Kristen.
I guess I have a procedural question. Do we come up with a plan of things that should be added, or are there properties that are available that have already been pre-designed for this? I don't know what land the town owns.
So I don't know that it's, I think we already have the answer on what needs to be added, and that goes back again to that Weston and Sampson plan, right? We don't have to recreate the wheel here because we already have the information.
Yeah.
So the reason I wanted to have this discussion tonight is because the things that we're talking about, whether it be in the town forest, on Horace Hill, or the Ridge Trail project, these are all things that are years in the making, right? They're not happening overnight. Like these initial discussions did not start last week, and now we're at this point. That all these things, whether we like it or not, are years in the making. Okay, so I understand that a skate park or a Gaga pit or an ice skating rink, those are things that were a little further out in the Weston and Sampson plan, but I think they are things that are important that we at least begin the discussion on now. So that when we do get a little ways down the road, so where they are in the plan, we have the bulk of that information ready to go. I mean, as far as it kind of seems, Shannon, you said you had had a discussion about the temporary skating rinks. Is there any information still living on any of that?
Probably not.
Okay.
It's hiding in your emails. We just tried to find a few vendors and look for them, so I don't know that it was in the land of no paper, so I don't know if anything still exists.
Okay. So I mean, as far as like, in my mind, right, like a temporary skating rink is kind of low-hanging fruit at this point, right? Like we could pluck this one pretty easily, I think, as a committee. With a little bit of research, to put a recommendation in front of the select board to say, hey, here's what we found in terms of expenses. Here's what we found in terms of what it looks like. At this point, we're probably looking at a public-private partnership, right? Because I don't know of any town-owned land that would be super awesome for an ice skating rink. So, you know, if we identified a number of properties where we think one might work, and then, you know, me as the town employee approach those business or, you know, property owners to say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? I feel like, you know, this is an attainable goal for this group to get something together on this. Is there anybody who wants to, you know, tackle, you know, maybe reaching out to, how do we want to approach it? Not property owners. We've already covered the property owner thing, right? But maybe reaching out to like some potential like providers of something like this for us, so that we have a general idea of what costs are, or, you know, maybe even reaching out to somebody who runs one of these temporary skating rinks in, you know, surrounding town to get an idea of what insurances look like and things like that. Is there anybody who kind of wants to tackle that education piece? Patricia, is that a question, or are you volunteering?
I'm volunteering.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
from
you,
the border of
Patricia.
Canada, and hockey and ice skating is a big thing. And yeah, that was my first thing, is if you're gonna not have, and I like the trails and or Parks and Rec thing. It does seem like we're getting so big that is going to have to be a thing, and that was my other consideration, is the insurance involved in that. You know, that whole thing. So, but I will research.
Okay. That would be awesome. And you know, back to the conversation we had before, you identifying yourself as a volunteer member of the Dover Trails and Recreation Committee, and not an employee or representative of the town of Dover. Just so we're clear on that page, but, you know, just that you are involved with this group and we're doing our due diligence on a project like this. I very much appreciate you stepping forward.
Yeah, I'm just going to research. I'm not going to approach anybody without like asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And if even if you come across somebody and you say, hey, I think it would be great if we talk to this person, I have no problem reaching out to that person on behalf of the town. Okay. But no, I'm glad, you know, like I said, I don't want to beat this horse to death. I just think that, you know, we start the conversations now, because we don't want to get 5 years down the road when the skate park is in the plan for and have nothing, or not even just the skate park, but you know what I'm saying? Any of the things in the plan that are further out, we want to kind of get ramping up to those things. Sarah, you had a question.
Well, I just wanted to say too, one of the things that, one of the complaints I think we hear a lot about committees in Dover is that we have great ideas and great momentum, and then nothing really happens after. And it makes it harder to get people to volunteer, because they feel like they're going to spend a lot of time talking and not really get anywhere. And so getting stuff into the pipeline so that we have announceable events. I mean, I think we should have something worth a ribbon cutting once a year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a big something, but something so that there's always motion, and it will build desire to contribute and be a part of this. And I think that you know, I've seen that kill a lot of really great ideas, and I'd like to see us avoid that.
Awesome. Thank you for the input, Sarah. I agree. So with that, if no one else has any further questions on that particular piece, I think we have hit 7:30. I appreciate it. Oh, Aaron, you had.
Just a really quick question. And I don't, again, this is coming from a position of, I haven't been on this committee for that long, but are there other opportunities as well? This is kind of shifting topics to working with Wilmington. You know, they have the OSEC. When we're talking about programs for older people, I'm thinking some of those programs might be indoor programs. They have a couple of great rooms that have not been used, or some that are being used. Is that a possibility to do a town partnership?
I don't think it's out of the question. I think, you know, but those are longer conversations, I think, than, so I don't disagree with you. And I think we have, you know, we also have facilities that can be used for those types of things, so that we're not constantly, you know, sending Dover people to Wilmington, but also bringing Wilmington people to Dover. So I think that's a longer conversation, and absolutely, I think it's something we could discuss. So thank you. So again, with that, I will go ahead and wrap it up. Just before we do, I would like to remind everybody that if there's something you would like to see or speak about on the agenda for these meetings, we are going to need to have those typically the Wednesday before the meeting so that we can get them on the agenda for Thursday and have them out to the group by Thursday or Friday of the week preceding our Trails and Rec meetings. So if you have questions, reach out to me. If you have things that you want on the agenda, reach out to either myself or Shannon. We work on the agendas together, but I will make sure that they get on there, okay? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Sarah makes a motion. I need a second. Second, all in favor? Aye. Perfect. Thank you all very much for coming, and we will talk to you all very soon.
Bye, folks.
I have a dumb question. What's a pump trail?